feet and a light unto my path. Unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path.
Welcome to Searchlight, a survey through Scripture with Pastor Jon Courson. It is our desire to bring you a systematic study of the entire Bible, chapter by chapter, book by book. People have lots of ideas on what makes a good marriage. Unfortunately, many of their ideas do not come from God. This seems rather foolish, since God is the designer of marriage. On today's program, we are going to look at God's ideas for marriage. This teaching comes from Genesis chapter 5. This chapter includes a genealogy which starts with Adam and Eve, the very first married couple. We began this teaching on our last program, so we'll be joining Pastor Jon as he is discussing what Jesus declared about marriage and how it relates to Adam and Eve. Here now is Pastor Jon.
And he answered them and said, verse 4, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning, that's the Father, he made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh? Wherefore, Jesus said, they are no more two, but they are one flesh. They're no longer two individuals, but because they have cleaved to each other, they are now one with each other. And what God has joined together, Jesus said, let not man put asunder. Well, they said, verse 7, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and to put her away? Why is it in the law at all, this whole idea of divorce? Why did Moses write this stuff? What are you going to do with that, Rabbi? They said to Jesus that day. Jesus said, verse 8, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, allowed you to put away your wives. It's because your hearts were so hard, so calloused, that Moses suffered it, allowed it, legislated it. The law makes provision for it, not because that's God's desire, that's God's plan or God's intent, but because of the hardness and callousness of men's hearts. Moses allowed it. Notice Jesus doesn't even say God ordered it. He says Moses allowed it. But from the beginning, it was not so. I say to you, verse 9, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication. Whoever puts away his wife, except it be for fornication, and marries another, commits adultery. And whosoever marrieth her, which is put away, doth commit adultery. Now, Jesus is getting right into the fray of this controversy, and he says, listen, you've got it all wrong. You need to not refer back to Moses. You need to go back further to the Garden of Eden and understand what God desires and declared when he said they are not two but one flesh. Their name is what? Adam. And Jesus said, there's no reason for divorce. There's no biblical, justifiable reason for divorce except, he said, for the case of fornication, adultery. Same word. What's Jesus saying to you and me? It means that Jesus is saying, God never desired for divorce to be part of the equation in any culture, in any society. But there is one exception, and that exception is if there is adultery. Now, Jesus didn't say you must divorce if there's adultery. But Jesus did say the reality of the situation is it will very, very possibly demand or require divorce. There is such a power in this idea of intimacy and sexuality. Such a spiritual force kicks in. So potent is it that Jesus in Matthew 19, referring back to the story of our text, throws light on the issue and says, divorce, not an option. Put it out of your vocabulary. Not even a thing you should be talking about, except, Jesus said, if there's adultery. But I'm sorry, she said to me. I'm really sorry that I did that. And she shared the things that she felt caused her to be forced into that position or vulnerable to that situation or pushed into the arms of that other man. I'm sorry. And she was. So why can't it just be forgiven? God forgives me. Why can't we just go on? And this is where, choir, I need you to sing loudly. I told her, yes, God does forgive you. Instantly, totally, thoroughly, completely. You are forgiven. When Jesus hung on that cross, he took that very sin of your adultery and he died for it, and the blood that he shed washes it away completely, so thoroughly that it doesn't even come into the mind of the Father. He doesn't even remember. As far as the east is from the west, that's how far that sin is. It's put behind his back, the prophet tells us. It's buried in the sea, the prophet speaks to you and me. The sin is forgiven, forgotten. It's not remembered anymore. But here's the problem. Sex is so powerful. Not just emotionally, not just physically, but spiritually and soulically. That it is the singular thing that our Lord said can put a bullet in the head of that marriage and kill it. And if it's dead, there's two possibilities. Adultery kills. It plain old, flat out kills. The mystery of two becoming one, beautiful. So too in adultery, they're ripped apart just as powerfully in one act of sex, of intercourse outside of marriage. There is a ripping. There is a destroying. And this is what people are confused about. They say, but Jon, you've been teaching us that sin is sin, whether it's gossip or whether it's a lousy attitude or lying or whatever it might be, that sin is sin. Is that not so? Yes. God doesn't rank sins, folks. Some church traditions do. Maybe you came from a church that had mortal sins and venial sins and not so bad sins. God doesn't look at it that way. All sin is equivalent. It's all equally hideous in the sight of our Father. But, listen, but not all sins carry the same repercussion. This is the problem. Paul said, don't be deceived. He said, God is not mocked. In other words, there's no exception to this. You can't mock this fact. Whatever a man sows, that shall he also reap. If I have Tambo sitting up here on this stool beside me, and I pull a revolver out of my pocket, and I put it to her temple, and I pull the trigger, she falls down dead, and I can be real sorry about that. And I can say, I just lost my head for a moment. I'm really sorry. I had a hard day today, and I was with Rick Vesney, and I just had a hard time, and I lost my stability, and my diet has been not right, and I'm sorry. I didn't really mean that. I'm sorry. I can be sorry. But my wife is on the floor dead because of one act of firing a single bullet into her head. And I can cry and weep before God, and God forgives me. He does. As amazing as that may be, God forgives me. But my marriage is over. Do you understand that? It's over. I'm sorry. I was pushed into it by circumstances, I feel, and I feel real bad, but my marriage is over. That's the repercussion. The sin, yes, forgiven. Even, amazing as this may be, forgotten. But God says, you need to understand something. If you sow seeds of destruction, you'll reap a harvest of destruction, and no one gets around that. My marriage is gone. I feel awful. That's the way it is. Unless God chooses to do a miracle. And Tammy is resurrected from the dead. And I go, awesome. But a miracle, by its very definition, is a rare exception. I would not encourage anyone to shoot your spouse and count on there being a bodily resurrection. You would be most foolish. Oh, it could happen. I'm not denying the possibility of a miracle. But you would not be wise to assume that there's a good possibility that a miracle will happen if I put that bullet in hubby's head or wifey's temple. It's probably not going to be. There's death. And the Lord here is saying, here's the fact. Divorce, don't even use the word. Don't even think about that. However, he says, there is an issue that truly can cause there to be the need to bury the dead relationship. And that's what divorce is. Well, then you say, if that's the case, okay, we get divorced and I move on. You don't move on. That's the problem. See, we have this crazy vulnerability in our depraved, fallen condition. We always think that the grass is greener on the other side of the hill. It's not. And if it is, it's probably because there's a septic tank underneath that patch of grass. I'm amazed by what I call a used car mentality that we're all sucked into. At least I am. Ever hang out at a used car lot? It's amazing what happens. I bought some used cars. Bought one recently. I took in the car that I was selling to the car lot, and here's my thing. Man, I'm getting rid of that lemon. And then I see the car on the lot that I'm going to buy. Before I even finished signing the papers on that car that I was getting rid of, another couple came and bought it. Before the papers were even, true story, you can ask Tambo, before the papers were even signed, another couple came in and bought it. And it hit us. This is crazy. Used car, people go in and say, got rid of that dump. And somebody else comes and says, wow, my dream come true. And it's a perpetual trading. And I bought a car that somebody said, boy, I'm glad I got rid of that bug. And I bought it. And it's really bizarre. The whole car thing illustrates powerfully our vulnerability. We think, man, that car that person just dumped, and they're saying that car that person just dumped, and it's this merry-go-round of trading cars that goes on and on. Millions of cars are sold each week in our country, just people trading cars, and people do the same thing relationally. And here's what they don't understand. The person that you're married to, even if you married that person without seeking God's will or guidance or direction, the person that you are married to, even if they were number 5,000 on the list, there was 4,999 ahead of her or him that would have been more suited for you. But once you say, I do, it's my strong conviction that God, knowing our used car mentality of trading to try and get a sleeker car and a faster, more powerful engine and a cushier interior, God knows that. And so even if the person that you picked and have committed to was number 5,000 on the list, once you say, I do, that person becomes number one. What? Yep. No one is going to make you happier. But I'm not happy with him. I'm not happy with her. Then you're not happy. You're going to take the same unhappiness, the same murmuring kind of spirit, the same complaining and sadness. You're going to take that same package into the next situation. No matter if he or she might be a newer model and have a sleeker engine and a cushier interior, you see. You're taking the same unhappiness. There's a dynamic at work here. That is, God says, knowing our nature, I believe the heart of God and part of the miracle of the mystery of matrimony is this. Okay, once you say I do, that's it. No one is going to make you happier. Even if that wasn't my best for you initially, now he is, or now she is. Until death separates you, or unless there be the sin of fornication and adultery that causes there to be a death, and the relationship has to be buried, and you are not the party that is guilty. Now, if one understands this, you look at your husband and you look at your wife and you say, this is it. There's not another one around the corner, over the hill, or down the line that's going to give me a greater thrill. There's not another one who's going to make me happier, more content, more fulfilled. You see, that is impossible. For this cause shall a man leave all others, cleave to his wife. The two shall be one, and let no man put it asunder. No man think that there is another possibility that would do more for me. No, once one says, I do, that's it. And this is what we see happening. People are saying, I don't believe that. I believe I could be happier with him or with her. And we have a valley full, a state full, a nation full, a world full of people that trade partner after partner, and they remain in their misery. And then here's what happens. As the years go on, their hearts are broken. Listen, nothing is worth the loss of your family. Nothing. There are couples in our church that weren't perfectly matched body, soul, and spirit. But they stayed together because they understood the way of the Lord, the highway of holiness. And I've watched them now because I've been here for 20 years. And I've watched the hair turn gray or fall out. And I've watched the back bow a bit. And I know of couples that I could name specifically who in their early years and even middle-aged years went through some very difficult and trying times. And now, they look at their grandchildren and they look at their family and they say, wow, it's worth it to go God's way. Sitting in my study a couple days ago, I was doing some correspondence and the speaker was on. And I heard something come over the speaker and I thought, they're playing one of my tapes and it's not the right time for Searchlight to be on. And I was sitting there doing some work and I listened and cocked my ear a bit. And I realized that's not me. That's my boy, Peter Jon. And I didn't know that he was going to be calling from Vanuatu to be on the air with Andy on Andy's missions program. And I walked into the studio and grabbed the microphone and pushed Andy aside. I'm bigger than he is. And I got behind the mic and I began to talk to Peter and interviewed him for the next half hour or so. And I don't know if you had a chance to hear that interview, but man, my son, he's 21, and he is mature. I mean, the way he sounded and the things he said. And he is teaching along with some of the other young brothers who have such a heart. And I left that interview and I was just smiling from ear to ear. My heart was just turning somersaults inside. You know why? Because Peter Jon ministers to my heart with his insights from the Word and truths that just really teach me and touch me. Now, that may not mean anything to you, but let me tell you what it means to me.
Sorry, but we'll have to wait until our next program to find out what that means to Pastor Jon. Nevertheless, the importance of family is obvious. It would do well for us to remember the warning that we have heard from Pastor Jon. Nothing is worth the loss of your family. Please join us next time for the conclusion of this important teaching. If you would like to have this complete teaching, you may order one from our website at joncourson.com. You may also call us toll-free at 888-544-4858 and ask for the teaching from today's date. Again, that ordering number is 888-544-4858. You will also find on our website a variety of Pastor Jon's books, teaching packets, MP3 CDs, and other Bible study resources. Again, the address of the website is joncourson.com.
As you listen to Jon's teachings, you will often hear him encourage us to set our hearts on heaven. To help us do just that, we have a book available called A Place for You, Reflections on Heaven. This book, taken from sermons that Jon has given, focuses on the hope of heaven. Heaven is a real place, and it is not that far away. This is a book for everyone who longs for that day when we will be in heaven with our Savior. You may order A Place for You from our website or by giving us a call here at Searchlight.
Searchlight is a listener-supported ministry. We appreciate your prayers and support. May the Lord richly bless you.